I don't know what happened to my voice, but it's kind of dry, so it might be a little bit hard to talk. I'm trying to push through, keeping it going with the 40th Super Sentai season in 2016, and that was the Sentai Zyuohger. I need another prop. It's actually related to Zyuoh the World's morphing sequence, the Sixth Ranger. I do have to admit, I kind of rushed watching this season because it was December and I was doing my best to really cram the remaining seasons into December so that I could release these videos in February, even though it's not exactly turning out the way I was initially planning, but it's okay. I think the fact that I even made him and put him out there is a win in and of itself. Much like this season, I think I'm going to do something different and try to talk about the things that threw me off first and then talk about the things that I liked. Maybe it's because of how much I had to rush binge watching this. I feel like there were a lot of things that threw me off more so. Not that I didn't enjoy the season, not that I didn't like the season. It was just there was a lot more that stood out to me in the things that threw me off category more so than the things I really liked and really enjoyed category. So I'll start off with the things that kind of threw me off. So this was pretty apparent even before I watched the season and when I found out what the season was, but it was the suit design. I don't want to criticize the suits too much, but it was having the print of the animal on the chest that was weird. I felt like they could have tried to stylize it more, especially because there is a little bit of a video game motif, kind of like Minecraft, and you kind of see this in the mechs and even in their gunblade weapon. It's kind of like or even some of their equipment where it looks like a Rubik's Cube, but then it's kind of blocky, kind of like something you'd see in like Minecraft or like a pixelated, an old, pixelated style game. I feel like they could have tried to stylize the design a little bit more. Like the clothes were cool, the helmets were cool, even like when they activate their abilities and how certain animal features develop. That stuff was cool, but the printout on the suit was a little bit distracting. Admittedly, once I started watching and in movement, it's not even that noticeable. So I got over it pretty quick, but it was pretty jarring the first time I saw it. It's like, oh man, that's the suit design. And speaking of design, so I really appraised the Zyuohger's announcer. This one was a little weird for me, just because. So I think what they were going for is they wanted to sort of incorporate like the Tarzan yell which being on his chest, and when they call the mechs and even some other things, it sounds less so that, and to me it sounds like something you'd hear at like a Broadway play or something. So another thing that kind of threw me off was so again, this is another season where it had a similar format and setting to Gingaman, where they can't return home, where the Rangers can't return home, and they have to live with a friend, and that friend's relative. But at least in this case, the friend is also a ranger, and they're living with that ranger's relative. And it wasn't his dad, it's his uncle. And in this case, kind of like Zyuohger, they try to hide it from him as long as they can. Or they have a similar format for the villains, like Gingaman, where they have different factions, and they even have one like kind of rando or wild card, similar to Gingaman. Also, I think it was interesting that the villains' themes were more like a game. I just read the wiki, and it at first it had the villain's name is the Death Aliens, and at first I thought it was like a mix between game and alien, but apparently Galleon is compounded from the word alien and Galleon, which is supposed to be Malay for mineral. Anyway, and then, in order to grow big, they insert a coin slot, much like a game. It kind of juxtaposes the like pixel Minecraft design of the Zyuohger's home, or the Jumans. And the Jumans are in a alternate world where they're anthropomorphic sapient animals. So one's a shark, one's a lion, one's an elephant, and one's a tiger. And then you see a few others throughout the series, like a gorilla, an eagle, a rhinoceros, a wolf, and an alligator. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting because with it being animals, I thought the incorporation of it being a game was actually like, when you think of like a game hunter, like a wild hunter, they say, oh, they're hunting for big game or something like that. But how they kind of juxtapose it with like a modern game with like arcade coin slots, well, semi-modern, and then the retro pixelated Minecraft look. It was interesting. It was unique. It definitely took a while to wrap my head around. For some reason, this ending reminded me of Digimon again. Kind of like when I said Zyuohger's ending reminded me of Digimon Season 3. Zyuohger's ending reminds me of Digimon Season 2. And what happens is they allow the world to combine. In the case of Digimon, the whole world is introduced to Digimon. Everyone is learning to get a partner, and they have everyone takes on a different role to incorporate and blend the two worlds together. In the case of Zyuohger, they're blending the Juman world and our human world, and they're trying to learn to coexist with each other. And if you want to bring it to something more recent, it even kind of, even though this one came after, kind of like reminds me of the Weathering with You ending. So if you haven't watched it, spoiler alert, but at the end where they basically let the world go to crap and basically change the whole world. It was the fact that it was such a world-changing event and they let it happen. So that's kind of it for the things that kind of threw me off. So I guess just into the things that I've liked. So despite the weird suit design, like I said, the helmets are really cool because in the case of Zyuoh Eagle or Red and Zyuoh the World, who is black, silver, and gold, their helmets can actually change, and that activates different powers because they actually all have access to more than just one animal. So then they pull up a part of the helmet and the visor changes and it resembles the next animal that they're of the power that they're calling from. And then Joe the World's cool because he's got 3, but I don't know, he has to have it as the world. And then especially in Japanese it's like Zawaru though. So it's like it's not as smooth as it could be. But when they do the changes, it's actually pretty cool. They both have the ability to harness all 3 of their respective animals at the same time, and it's actually pretty cool. Like, I don't think we've really seen major form changes that same way. I mean, there's always an add-on, whether it's like a piece of armor or the whole suit can change, kind of like the first one that pops into my mind is Abba Ranger, where there's a Abade Max, which is Abade Red's power up, but it's an entirely new suit and new helmet. It's not one that he can just activate. It's more of a power up than it is like being able to switch, if that makes any sense. Can't talk about the 40th anniversary season without talking about the big 40th anniversary like special. They do something for the crossover special, and that's supposed to also be a little bit of a 40th anniversary special, I think, from what I've briefly read. During Zyuohger's run, they hit the 2000th episode milestone for all of Super Sentai. So they do have a 2-part special episode for that, and it is a special crossover event with the previous major anniversary season, and that season being Gokaiger. And it was just really fun watching that. It was, even though I had only watched that season like 3-4 weeks prior, seeing them again and seeing how much they'd change in the course of 5 years was pretty interesting. And it's kind of fun, like they finally get to pull the "I'm your senpai" card. They really had to breeze through all the history of the Super Sentai in only a matter of 2 episodes, something Gokaiger had to do in the span of 50. But it was fun watching it nonetheless. So I believe they do make an appearance in the big crossover 40th anniversary movie, so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing them again in that. So lastly, at first this was in my things that threw me off, but I think I'd rather move it to the things that I liked, and I think that's the reason why I like it. And it's so Masao, or Joe of the World, he's really strong. Like, he was the first one to use all 3 of his abilities at once, but he's got issues. He's incredibly insecure. As you kind of learn about him throughout the season, you find out like he's a real people pleaser because he's socially awkward, but he also wants people to really like him. So like, he picked up a bunch of skills so that he can impress people, so that they can like him and they can be his friend. But then, the second you kind of discourage him, he like falls into a depression. And I know a lot of people find that really annoying, but deep down, that's pretty relatable. Like, it's kind of like Shinji Ikari from Neon Genesis Evangelion. Everyone says, "Oh, he's a whiny bitch," or "he's a whiny brat." It's like, "Oh, grow up hair already," and stuff like that. But with the depression and sometimes you're not able to connect with people because you're scared and you're insecure. Sometimes that's really relatable, and I really like how he really starts to come into his own, and in the big like finale fight with the big bad at the end, it reveals a lot, because he's actually a foil to the villain, and they pretty much describe it right before the fight starts. And it's like, once that clicked, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And although on the surface it can be annoying, and sometimes it's annoying because it's a reflection of you, but he's relatable and he kind of represents a lot of what people feel. It got kind of real. And speaking of getting real, is my favorite episode, and that was episode 27, Which One Is Real? So the interesting thing about this episode is that it actually plays on 2 common tropes or occurrences in Super Sentai, and that is the clip show and the imposter episode. It pulls from a common like the common bag of tricks that they like to use to format certain episodes. In this case, it was the clip show and the imposter episode. So what happens is one of the villain generals makes a copies of 2 of the Rangers, and now the team has to figure out which one's which. So the best way to do it is by asking each pair a series of questions to figure out who knows what, who's real. And it being Japanese, they try to do it in a style of a Japanese game show, and they have the shiny suits, the big bow tie, a microphone, and they even have like podiums. As they answer questions about occurrences that happen throughout the season, it shows the clips of those episodes. It was actually with this episode that I eventually figured out that they also started doing clip shows in the summer, because summer's a big deal. Kids are finishing up their summer vacation, so they're about to go back to school, so they try to recap everything. And at that point, end of August, beginning of September, is also halfway through the year from when Super Sentai starts, which is usually in mid-February to early March. I would notice that they would do it for the New Year's episodes, because New Year's is a big deal in Japan, and within 1 or 2 episodes of the New Year's episode, the end game or finale arc starts. So I can understand why they would do it there. And then with this, I eventually realized, like, have they been doing it for the summer one too? Because I thought I started noticing it, but I wasn't really sure. They eventually find out who's real and who's not by finding out who was wrong, because they asked some really obscure questions, and they say, okay, we wouldn't even know the answers to those. So if they remember it to the very finite detail, then that means that they were the imposter. And the imposters didn't even know. I should have mentioned this. The reason why this episode had a sense of urgency is because the pair that were made copies and then the imposter pair both had explosive vests. And then if they didn't figure out who was who and didn't get rid of the correct ones, the vest was going to detonate and destroy all 4 of them. So then when they eventually realize who's who, the Rangers still want to try to save the imposters, and the imposters are actually kind of touched. They decide that they'll take off the vest, but when they take off the vest, that means they will cease to exist, but it allows the real ones to live on. And when it happens, it was a pretty touching moment, and the Rangers, especially the 2 that were the originals, kind of recognized that even though they were copies, it also copied the good parts of them. That was the big reason why this episode really touched me and almost kind of hit close, is because it actually reminds me of a few things. It took me a while to figure out which episode I want to talk about. It was like the first time I watched it, I've only watched this season once, but when I came across this episode, that ending scene really stood out to me. And then it was between this and an episode where certain dead people are brought back from the dead as memories, and that was a whole emotional episode. And they actually both covered the theme of the season. But I decided to go with this one because of recent events, when I was putting my notes together and trying to figure out which one a certain event happened. So when I was figuring this one out, I remembered this episode, and I said, okay, it has to be this one. So long story short, tragedy struck January 26th on a Sunday. I probably don't need to even say what that tragic event was, but it shook me to my core, and it was one of those things that kind of brought me back down. It was kind of like I got really discouraged, kind of like Masaho, and I was kind of thinking, dang, what is the point of living your life, trying to do the best in life, if it could be taken away just like that. And it took some time to reset, recalibrate. It actually still kind of is, but I'm getting better to remember that it's because life is short and that it can happen at any moment that we should be doing those things. So a few other things happened that week. It's also the Arrow finale, and they kind of ended on a note of like the hero's work was never done, and it's up to the next generation, the next group, to continue that legacy. And even though this isn't even a superhero or action thing, there was the Good Place finale, and let's just say it played on it was some classic textbook karma. To kind of bring it back to Zyuohger, the whole theme of this season was like kind of about connections. Like everyone and everything is connected, not just humans and animals, humans to humans. It's like everything's connected. Like, and they kind of do it in a like history way where this person affected this person, so it eventually brought him back full circle to this person, or even like when someone dies, they're always kind of with you. And it was kind of something as simple and basic as that really hit me where it hurt. And that's why this episode, although may not be unique in terms of the story or how it's done, what it means to me, the timing of it and everything happened, and the message is really what kind of matters. I don't know if I read it correctly, but I think it's pretty similar to Superior Spider-Man. So what happens in Superior Spider-Man is, I think, a dying Dr. Octopus or Doc Ock switches bodies with Peter Parker. So Doc Ock is now in Peter Parker's body, and I think Peter Parker was put into Doc Ock's body, but because that body was dying, that Peter Parker died. But something happened where he was able to leave enough of his goodness in his old body when Doc Ock took over, and then Doc Ock in Peter's body became good, and using his intellect and genius was able to fix a lot of the issues that Peter Parker was having as a struggling superhero. Like, I think the big thing was like how he was able to maintain and balance all of his relationships while still maintaining his identity as Spider-Man. I think eventually Peter's goodness takes over and he becomes Peter Parker again or something like that. So even though the episode wasn't necessarily unique in what they do, it plays on two tropes of the clip show and the imposter episode. So half of it wasn't even new footage, but the last scene and how deeply it actually connects to the theme of the season of connections. Some connections never die, and the idea of continuing the legacy, of passing it down, whether it's generations or to the next person, or karma, was something I really needed at the time, and it hit deep. And because of that, this particular episode will always have a place in my heart. Oh man, this is gonna sound nerdy, but even though this episode wasn't centered around Masao, I felt like the discovery to Masao and the Rangers were bringing me back up. That was nerdy.